Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk with Tubbs, a petrolhead's perspective. As always, I'm your host, Tapelo, aka Tubbs, and I'm going to talk you through this podcast that deals with everything motoring. We're going to talk what's new on the market, what's old on the market, what's good on the market, and also what's bad on the market. Then we're also going to delve into some motorsport, but more focused on my favorite form of motorsport, Formula One. We're going to talk driver lineups, what we feel, react, but most of all, I'm trying to give you a petrol head's perspective. Words that come from someone who's as passionate about the industry as anyone I know. So as ever, let me not waste your time. Here we go. Talk with Tubbs is a go. Okay, so let's start off strong with this podcast. Electric cars. Yeah, look, I think I've said it enough on this podcast. I don't think electric cars are all that. I think they work best as a second car or as a general city runaround. There's certain issues I have with electric cars, and then there's certain issues I have with the way the industry has sort of pushed electric cars into our lives and made them seem like the Hail Mary. So I'm not gonna go deep into that, right? The electric car I want to talk about, actually, there's two electric cars on this episode now that I think about it. The first one is the BMW i4 M50, which was released during the week. Well, last week, because you'll be listening to this in a new week. I think what this BMW does, and it's one issue with electric cars I had when electric cars started becoming a more mainstream thing, was that we had designs from these companies that we liked and we had designs that worked. But the moment they tried to make an electric car or an electric car equivalent of whatever models they had in their lineup, they took the styling and they tried to make it in the way they described it back then, was that they tried to make it something evolutionary, something from the future, and I think a lot of those designs were miss. If you look at something like the Prius, a lot of those designs just didn't look right, or they didn't suit kind of the character that we build with the brand. And if you look at a lot of the cars that these brands make, they're generally evolutions of design. So we kind of fall in love with one, and then they just slightly alter it for a few years, and then we don't complain because it's a design that we love. So one thing I'm currently liking at the moment is that when these companies are making electric cars, they're literally just putting electric motors instead of an internal combustion engine in a shell that we already like. And this is what I like about the BMW i4. It's essentially a 4 Series, just electric. Yes, obviously there are a few alterations to the outer shell. They don't need vents for cooling in the way that they did with an internal combustion engine. So certain things will change slightly, but ultimately it's still the shell of a BMW 4 Series. So that's what I like about this car. What don't I like? It's electric. But look, it's all right. It's good. It's decent. It looks the part. If it does the job, then fair enough. I just think the biggest problem with this is ultimately going to be pricing. I don't think we have reached the stage with electric cars where they can become somewhat affordable. So if you're looking at buying one of those, I can't even make a prediction now on how much it's going to be, but I know it's going to be expensive, because if you look at something like the Mini Cooper Electric, the BMW i3, all that kind of stuff, those are small cars, hatchbacks, and they're already running 600,000-700,000 rand. So you can imagine with something like this that's targeted at a more premium buyer, you'll be looking at something close to 1 million, if not over that. So I'll be interested to see how it does, because they've already confirmed it's coming to South Africa, and yeah, I'll reserve my judgment on how well I think it's gonna sell, but I think ultimately the biggest problem with that car will definitely be its pricing, because I think it's going to be hella expensive, and already that puts you in a niche market, but it also being electric already diminishes the market that you're looking at. So let's wait and see what it does. But overall, I do like the fact that it looks like a BMW 4 Series, just electric. Okay, so another electric car this time, but something on a totally different spectrum compared to the BMW i4, and it's the Rimac Nevera. Now, we all know Rimac as the company whose car tried to kill Richard Hammond, but look, they're a company that's making waves in the electric motoring sphere, and with this Nevera, they really made a statement. So this is an electric hypercar with a power output of 1,914 horsepower, 2,360 Newton meters of torque. These are crazy numbers, honestly. As much as I don't care that much for super hyper car performance electric cars, I cannot deny that the outputs of this thing are crazy. And we saw how crazy they were. If you didn't check out Carwow's drag race video, they drag raced it against an SF90, which is not a slouch by any means of the imagination, but this thing goes. Again, that's the advantage of instant torque electric power. And apparently, they set an unofficial drag race record of 8.62 seconds. That's impressive. That's impressive for a car that weighs, I think it's what, just over 2 tons. But the power output on this thing and the acceleration is mind-boggling. I can only imagine what it's like being inside a car that moves that fast. But look, it's great. It shows technology. I think it's a good-looking car. I will say that. I'll give it that. It shows technology. It shows development. It shows performance. But ultimately, I think having such a high-performance car as an electric car, it kind of diminishes. I don't know. It's not something I'm that interested in. I feel like these cars, because of the electric power and stuff like that, look, if they go great on the road, that's fine. But again, you know how I feel about this massive power struggle, this massive, we're going to make 1,000 horsepower X, we're going to make 900 horsepower Y. Where are you really going to use this Rimac? And this is not generally aimed at the Rimac, it's just what's in the news now. But any electric hypercar, Lotus Avaya, any of these hypercars, your Bugattis and stuff. Look, the problem is with an electric car, you lose the sense of occasion when you're driving at normal speeds. There's no sound. There's no enjoyment. The enjoyment of these super high performance electric hypercars comes in that acceleration, 0 to whatever speed you're going to clock, or 30, 50 kilometers to whatever you're going to clock. That's where the enjoyment comes in. You have to drive these things like that to get the enjoyment. I don't think the enjoyment of something like an Avaya will be the same as 1,000 horsepower SF90, simply because of the internal combustion engine. You can drive an internal combustion engine at under 100 kilometers and derive, in my opinion, more fun, more entertainment, more enjoyment than you would if you drove an electric hypercar at the same speed. That sense of sound, that sense of vibration just gives you the entertainment. It gives you, again, it's such a difficult thing to, but if you've driven any car, or if you've done any sport, and if you've done anything that raises your heart rate, we call it the fizz. You know what the fizz is? That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't think these hypercars give you the fizz when they're being driven at sedate road legal speeds. It's just the way it is. The sensation of changing gears adds an extra dimension, So look, overall, it's a marvel of engineering how they got that car so light, because we know these electric cars are coming in at 2.3, 2.4 tons. This came in at just over 2 tons. It's got impressive performance. It's all-wheel drive, but yeah, man, it's great and all, but it's really something that I don't think I'd ever be interested in. And of course, it is £2 million, so that kind of 2 million euros, I think. So that already pushes me out of the realm of I'm interested in a Rimac. So, but honestly, it's great, and for what Rimac are doing, let's hope and wish the best for the company, because I did hear rumors that Porsche bought a sizable stake in the company, so that could mean a collaboration with Porsche trying to acquire IP and stuff. So yeah, I think the future looks good for them, but But I'm still stuck on that performance. I won't give a lot to that car, but that performance is otherworldly because that thing demolished an SF90. And as a Ferrari fanboy, that hurts a bit. It hurts, but yeah, man, it's all good. So let's move on to something I think I'll enjoy way more than a Rimac Nevera. And yes, something I'll enjoy more than a Rimac Nevera is a BMW M5 CS. Yes, a 4.4 liter twin turbo V8 powered luxury family sedan, but that's had some weight removed, has 4 bucket seats, and looks like the car of my dreams. Yeah, that's the car I'm talking about. A dinosaur juice burner. You know, I feel like I've spoken about electric cars. Now I need to ruin all of that and talk about something that's killing the planet. Yes, I sounded like an eco warrior, but that's just for fun. So, the BMW M5 CS. I think I've touched this car on the podcast when it was first released, but I watched a review over the weekend from Piston Heads. I'll link the video down in the description below as always. Um, ooh, I think the biggest summary I can make about this car is what I tweeted just after I watched the video. Does the world want this car? No. Does the world need this car? No. Does the world appreciate that this car exists? Hell yes. And it's kind of the conclusion that Dan Prosser, who's the guy who was reviewing the car, kind of came back to. It shouldn't make sense, but somehow it does. It's just there, you know. I think the biggest interest for me watching the video was how big of a compromise this car was compared to something like a standard M5 or an M5 competition. These days, the competition is a standard. Look, I promise you, I'll make a podcast where I go deep into my problem with the nomenclature that companies use at the current moment. BMW, Mercedes, stuff like that. I'll get into why I think they're kind of missing the plot a bit. But yeah, now we're talking about the M5 CS. So yes, the general interest was how big of a compromise it was over the standard M5 competition, right? And it's obviously going to be way stiffer than the standard one. It loses a lot of the grand touring capabilities of the M5 comp because it's so track focused. Um, for people that buy this car, how many are going to take it on track? That's a difficult question to answer. But it's such look. This car doesn't make sense, man. This is not the car you buy with your head. This is the car you buy with the heart. I don't think in any situation can you justify the need, the existence, or the desire to buy an M5 CS when an M5 comp exists. I think that's its biggest problem. However, I would love to have a go in one. Honestly, because this car is pulling at the heartstrings. It's great. I think it looks fantastic. That arrangement of 4 bucket seats is crazy. I think when it first came out, I said Apex. If you don't know, Apex is a company based around the Nurburgring, and they do track day rides. You can pay to drive with them, or you can pay to have an instructor go with you in their car and stuff like that. But they had an F80 M3 as a ring taxi that was modified inside. They removed the seats and they added 4 bucket seats. So essentially, you'd have the instructor driving, and you and 2 other friends could enjoy the experience. I jokingly said Apex should consider an M5 CS as the new Nurburgring taxi. And I still stand by that. What one hell of an experience that would be. But yeah, man, ultimately a car the world doesn't need nor want, but a car that the world appreciates exists because yeah, that car is touching on the petrol head side of everyone. But what a fantastic piece of kit. Well done, BMW. Still unnecessary, but we love to see companies going on a limb and doing something extraordinary or crazy, as people would say, just for the sake of enjoyment. Um, appealing to a petrol head, but ultimately, from a business perspective, this is a cash grab. It's a limited edition car. We know they're going to try and sell a lot of them. So, yeah, it's compromised over an M5. I still say if you want that kind of enjoyment, just get an M5 competition, and Bob's your uncle. Jobs are good in. Thank you so much. Right. So, I know you've all been wondering why the title, and it sounds clickbaity, but trust me, this had the potential of being one of the greatest weekends of motorsport ever. Ever. I'll tell you why. This weekend, we had the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Formula One, more on that later. Obviously, and the contributing series, Formula Two, Formula, whatever, but Formula One this weekend. Great. Nurburgring 24-hour this weekend. Whew. Um, 4 hours, or was it 6 hours, of France, Le Castellet, in the European Le Mans series. That was a thing. I know, right? MotoGP, Catalonia this weekend, right? If you're a Formula Drift fan, like I told you to check it out, there was Formula Drift Japan this weekend, right? I mean, you see what I mean? If you're a motorsport fan, like I am, this had the potential of being the greatest, most congested weekend ever, ever. There was literally always something on TV. But you know what happened? I had a lot of work to do this weekend, but I was sure I'm still going to try and watch some of these races. I'm still going to get my bum in a seat. Guess what happened? Because we live in South Africa, Saturday morning at 8 a.m., I lost power. No electricity. It came back at 8:45 in the evening. I sat a whole day, the whole of Saturday, without any power whatsoever. My phone died. I didn't charge my phone the night before. Look, I had no opportunity of watching these. This was such a huge, huge weekend for motorsport, and I missed almost everything. Everything. The one thing I could watch a bit of, and that was because of the delay, was the Nurburgring 24-hour, and this is what I want to touch on. I watched a bit of it after the race was stopped because of fog and just bad conditions on track. I think in one section of the track, they just didn't think the risk was worth it, so they stopped it. I think I saw the last hour of the race, the last hour. But I wanted to highlight this. I can't really say if it was a good race or not. Like I said, I couldn't watch any of these. My weekend just went to shit. But Kevin Estre is a Nurburgring 24-hour winner. Man, him and his team, obviously it's a team game. It was Michael Christensen, Lars Kern, Kevin Estre, and Matteo Cardli, right? Oh wait, Caroli. There we go. Got it right, I think. But if you might not know some of these people, I particularly know two. Lars Kern is a Porsche driver. I think, if I remember properly, he's the guy that set the Porsche GT2 MR record of, what was it, 6 minutes 40 seconds, something like that. He was the driver then. And if you've watched any content that has to do with the Nurburgring, Misha's channel on YouTube, all that kind of stuff, Kevin Estre is usually the guy driving a Porsche at 10/10 around the Nurburgring. What a fantastic driver. I had the privilege of watching him live at the Kyalami 9-hour in 2019. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of endurance racing. I'm trying to get into it because it is really interesting, but I just don't watch it as much as I do other forms of motorsport. But he's one driver that I'm a big fan of, and whenever I see something about him, I generally try and watch. I've watched some onboards of him going around the Nürburgring. Recently, he drove the 991.2 GT3 RS Manti Racing around the ring to clock a record for that. And I watched that video and the behind the scenes, and he said he hopes this year he can finally break that duck and win at the Nürburgring 24-hour. And here we are now, and he's a race winner. I'm so happy for the guy. He seems like a genuinely nice guy. One hell of a driver. I'll try and link some of his stuff in the description box below. But man, what a driver. I'm so happy for him. I'm also heartbroken I couldn't watch more of that race because the Nurburgring 24-hour is always an event. I think it's one of the toughest races in the world. It's so unpredictable. It's crazy. But Kevin Estre is a Nurburgring 24-hour race winner. And now a big topic for the weekend, which is something I actually got to watch, the Formula One Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now, this is a big one, so strap in. Like I said, on Saturday I couldn't watch qualifying because of the electricity issue. I woke up early on Sunday and watched quali. I'm coming at this race in order, right? So qualifying was a mess, okay? Qualifying was a mess, and because of turn 15 was catching out a lot of drivers. And if you've ever raced on any Formula One game that has Azerbaijan as a track, turn 15 is quite sketchy. I think is the proper term to use, because you're really coming in from a flat section and then you brake as it goes downhill, and it's a quick turn. So it's very easy to overload your front tires, understeer into the wall. And I think if you watched qualifying, you could see there was always a distinct moment where drivers could pull out and go into the runoff area. But the problem is, it's a split second. If you miss that opportunity to bail, you're definitely hitting the wall. And we saw, how many was it? 4 red flags during the qualifying session of drivers continuously hitting turn 15. So that already made it very interesting. I thought a lot would happen at turn 15 in the race. Luckily, the drivers kind of sorted it out, but the race was something else entirely. So one of the biggest talking points of this weekend was how Mercedes hung Valtteri Bottas out to dry. And I think this is where we kind of need to go a bit into detail about it, right? I know in the current season, Mercedes are looking like a bad team towards Valtteri Bottas because of the way he's been underperforming. But a lot of that has to go down to him in certain moments. And I'll explain. Him and Lewis Hamilton ran different wing setups this weekend. They ran different wings. The biggest speculation was why. From what I could gather and what I heard, is that it was a personal decision. They had 2 options for the wing. They had the Lewis Hamilton wing, which had less downforce, and the Valtteri Bottas wing, which had more downforce. The reason why they were given like that, drivers were given the choice, and it's all about which one they felt comfortable with the long runs during free practice. Lewis Hamilton felt he'll do better in the race with the less downforce setup. Valtteri Bottas felt comfortable with the high downforce setup. That's just, again, that's the problem. These cars are so, as good as a car can be, setup is just as important, and the confidence that the driver has in that setup is important. So they picked 2 varying setups, right? And now this is where I think Mercedes kind of put Valtteri Bottas out to hang. But again, it's the way things are done. Apparently in the Mercedes team, before even the season starts, they kind of talk through the different qualifying sessions and who's going to go out first, give the guy in the behind the toe and stuff like that. This weekend, it just happened to be Lewis Hamilton who got to choose who goes out first, and he chose Bottas. So Lewis Hamilton got the toe, set a decent lap. Charles Leclerc behind them could pick up on their toe, and he set a super competitive lap. Joke, Charles Leclerc is getting pulled because of some witchcraft, because he sets a first competitive lap, and as everyone tries to challenge that, there's a red flag which kills the whole session. I know. It happened in Monaco, it happened in Baku. It's just a weird coincidence, but it's funny to look at. But yes, so Valtteri Bottas was extremely unlucky because when he tried to set his fast laps, they weren't really competitive. And when he was on a competitive lap, the red flag came out and he couldn't set a proper time. So he was stuck in 10th place. I think that's more a strategy error, equal parts the team, equal parts the drivers. Max Verstappen is still proving to be one hell of a driver. Look, I am a Lewis Hamilton fan. I will not deny that. But I've watched sports long enough to appreciate other talented people that compete in these spaces. And I will tell you, Max Verstappen is out there as one of the best drivers in the world right now. The man can do wonders with that car. And we saw that throughout qualifying and throughout the race. I think it's so unfortunate what happened to him in the race. The FIA and Formula One need to have a chat with Pirelli. If you don't know, Max Verstappen was leading the race by about, I think it was 4 to 5 seconds, the gap at the time, 4 laps to go down the long straight, and he just had a puncture. That's it. Now, we'd seen that happen before in the race with Lance Stroll, suffered the same kind of issue, a random puncture. Now, the biggest problem is these were on hard tires, and we know they can last long. And Pirelli had said to the drivers and the teams that these tires could do comfortably 40 laps. So you're not. That's why a lot of people opted for the one strategy. Starts on the softs, the one stop strategy. Start soft, end with the hards. It was a good strategy. It was quick enough, and it's something you could sustain. So when Lance Stroll crashed, had his puncture with, I think he was on 30 laps of the hard tires, people started to question what's the problem. Was there debris on the track? All that type of stuff. And then when Max Verstappen having a puncture, similarly, it couldn't have been debris. And he had only done, I think, 33 laps on the hard tires. So now you're getting nervous for everyone who's running on the hards, because Lewis Hamilton had already done, I think, 34 laps at the time. So yeah, it was a bit of a difficult one. So they need to have a go at Pirelli about that. So I was really heartbroken for Max Verstappen. He really drove a perfect race. Yes, the slow Lewis Hamilton pit stop put them in the game. The pit stop wasn't down to team error or driver error. It was just safety issues with Pierre Gasly driving into the pit lane. They had to hold Lewis Hamilton up at a few extra seconds. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. But yeah, Red Bull were on fire. Their strategy looked great. That pit stop from Mercedes put them in the game. Max Verstappen drove a great race. Unfortunately, the puncture cost him that race. Sergio Perez eventually won the race. What a brilliant drive that was from him. I think this is I've said this before. This is exactly what Red Bull wants from a second driver. They want a guy who's going to pick up the scraps. If Verstappen has a problem or Verstappen can't finish the race, then they have someone who will finish the race and get them crucial constructors points. So yes, Sergio Perez is proving out to be that guy. Yes, he's been developing slowly this season, but I have faith that going forward, these are the kind of performances we can see from him. A big disappointment for me was Charles Leclerc. Qualified pole, which was really quite an achievement, because we know that Ferrari is a bit down on power when it comes to the straights. It's good in the slow stuff. We saw that in Monaco, but he just started falling back at the start of the race. He just started falling back. I thought he'd be more competitive. I was asked for my top 5 prediction. I had him, I think I had him finishing 4th. So yeah, look, I was disappointed in his performance, No, I actually had him finishing 3rd. I was disappointed in his performance. Ultimately, he finished 4th, which is not that bad, but I thought he'd do a bit more. Lewis Hamilton. I'm going to touch on Lewis Hamilton because I was hurt. I was hurt this weekend. When Max Verstappen had his crash, I celebrated. Oh, yes, started screaming because, Lewis Hamilton just has to maintain and he's got the championship lead again. But as I said, then the heart came back and I was like, no, this is really sad for Verstappen. But it was a good opportunity for Lewis Hamilton to gather some points and overall lead the championship again. Unfortunately, after Verstappen's crash, there was a red flag. A standing start was called. Lewis Hamilton actually had a brilliant start, got ahead of Sergio Perez, but unfortunately, he touched a button on his steering wheel, which came out later. I first heard it through Anthony Davidson, who was commentating on the race, but he's also the Mercedes simulator driver. Lewis Hamilton touched that button, and unfortunately, it's a brake bias sort of like button. What it does is it alternates the braking force between the actual brakes and the regen. So they use it primarily to warm up tires during safety car periods or the warm up lap. It pushes a lot of the braking to the front tires. So you want to have it on during those slow laps to get heat into the tires, But the moment you start the race, you switch it off so you can use the standard brake bias setup that you prefer. So when Lewis Hamilton was tangling with Sergio Perez for the start, he touched that button by mistake, switching on. They call it what do they call it? Brake magic at Mercedes. And apparently this is standard. A lot of teams have this kind of system. Mercedes just call it brake magic. So Lewis Hamilton touched it by mistake, and that caused all the braking performance of the car to be on the front wheels, which caused a huge lockup, and he went down the escape route on turn one, and that ultimately cost him the race. He finished in P15. No points for him, which is really sad because you don't see Lewis Hamilton make mistakes. I don't think this is Lewis Hamilton buckling under pressure. I just think these are things that happen, but we're so focused on him, it just seems like a bigger thing. Valtteri Bottas qualified 10th, but was nowhere in the race. I think he ultimately finished in P12, which is bitterly disappointing for Bottas. I think Mercedes are struggling this year. And it's not Mercedes. I wouldn't say Mercedes are buckling under pressure. I just think Mercedes just don't have a car that they're fully confident in. So they're having to try so many different things that sometimes they're a hit and a miss. Setup is becoming so important this year. So Red Bull are so good. They've finally got a car that they can dial in, and it's super competitive. So a weekend like this is disastrous for Mercedes in terms of the Constructors' Championship. Ultimately, nothing lost or gained for Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. They're still in a stalemate. Max Verstappen still leads the Driver Championship by 4 points. But Mercedes cannot afford going forward. If Perez is picking up form, Verstappen is still going to be as consistent and as competitive as he is. Mercedes need their second car. Mercedes cannot afford to have Valtteri Bottas sitting back and struggling the way he is. They need him to be close to Lewis Hamilton to help him. He can block strategy, he can help. And Mercedes 1-2, 1-3 is good for the team, but they cannot afford Bottas to be languishing at the back as he was. This was a brilliant race. Big ups to driver of the day, Sebastian Vettel. I know he ultimately finished second in the race. What a performance and drive that was from him. If this is him picking up form, then I'm all for it. He's a driver who's had a tumultuous past 3 seasons. He's someone we want to see succeed. He's just a likable character on the grid. So yeah, brilliant for him. Pierre Gasly, another podium for him. Ah man, he was so happy and everyone is happy for him. Look, I think this podium from this weekend was just filled with drivers that we want to see succeed. They're just likable people on the grid. So it was a fantastic race. Great race. It really hot it up at the end. I put it up there with Turkey last year. 2 brilliant races, so unpredictable. And I think a good way to sum up this race was a tweet by Luke Smith, who is a Formula One journalist for Autosport. He said, "Enjoy today. Good reminder of how brilliant and unpredictable Formula One can be. Championship hotting up nicely and so many great storylines brewing. Sports is wonderful escapism even when it's work." And that is really why I enjoy sports. It's such a brilliant thing. It's unpredictable. I will not bet money on sport, but I will forever watch and love sport, and Formula One is up there. I'll just go through the final race classification. Just listen to how unpredictable and how cool this is. So in first place, we had Sergio Perez, second, Sebastian Vettel, Pierre Gasly in third, fourth, Charles Leclerc, fifth, Lando Norris. Fantastic drive, Lando. You're still putting in the performances. Sixth, Fernando Alonso. Seventh, Yuki Tsunoda. I think he's a driver that needed this result. And let's hope this is where he builds his confidence and starts matching the performance of that car going forward. Eighth was Carlos Sainz. Ninth, Daniel Ricciardo. 10th, Kimi Raikkonen. 11th, Antonio Giovinazzi. The Alfa Romeo seem to be kind of holding down 10 to 12 spots all the time, so that's good for them. 12th, Valtteri Bottas, as I've said, ultimately super disappointing. 14th was Mick Schumacher. 13th, Mick Schumacher. 14th, Nikita Mazepin. good result for that team. We know how difficult that car is, and it's underperforming, but I think they needed that for their confidence as rookies in the sport. 15th was Lewis Hamilton. Ultimately disappointing. That hurt me, but I wouldn't say anything. 16th was Nicholas Latifi. 17th was George Russell. Tough one that. And Verstappen finished in P18, Stroll P19, Ocon P20. Obviously, Verstappen, Stroll were the non-finishers of the race. Ocon suffered an engine failure, lost power throughout the race. Stroll and Verstappen suffered the same fate of a puncture on the rear tires and them hitting the wall. Ultimately, what a fantastic motorsport weekend this was, and I missed the majority of it, but it's a fantastic weekend. This was a good race for Formula One. I'm looking forward to the next races. We've got France coming up, the French Grand Prix. Isn't usually an interesting race, but definitely worth a watch because of the storylines that are brewing throughout the grid. And then we have a double header at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Though that served up fantastic racing last year. So let's hope for fantastic racing again this year. This season is hotting up to be a super, super season. So, as always, thank you guys for listening to this podcast. I cannot believe it's been 10 episodes on this platform. Again, thank you so much for the continued support. I appreciate it. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more. Follow me on my Twitter if you want to engage with me more. It's at tabs_Miriohle, THAPZ_MEREOHLE. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. It's been a fantastic ride, and I'm enjoying it as ever. Thank you so much. Always check out the description box because I do link some of the videos I talk about. Ultimately, hope you guys have